Do I sound gay? This is a question I've thought about a lot. Just like my clothing choices or my body language, can the way I talk give away my sexuality? Or on the other hand, can my speech style be used to signal my queerness on purpose? In this video, I'll break down popular perceptions of queer speech, why or why don't they exist, and how important they are to our daily performance of identity. We've probably all heard it, from straight comedians.
I was just like an old queen. I would come out to the recess yard and be like, everyone get out of my way. I just want to sit here and feed my birds.
To queer actors portraying queer characters.
Where's the lusciousness? Where's the juice? If I squeezed you, I wouldn't be able to get enough out of you to fill a Dixie cup of lemonade.
There are certain popular ideas of how gay people talk. For decades, we've seen what linguist Jeremy Calder has called popular culture's simultaneous fascination and anxiety around the voices of queer speakers. For example, researchers have been able to identify many emblematic features of the stereotypical gay man's speech, sometimes called simply the voice, such as clearer and longer vowels and more phrase final syllable lengthening than straight men, clearly articulated P's, T's, and K's, and high-frequency S's, the so-called gay lisp. There are strong stereotypes about what gay men sound like, stereotypes that essentially boil down to this. The imagined gay man sounds like the imagined woman in Western society. Is there a parallel lesbian voice in popular imaginations? Let's take a look at an example from the 90s sitcom Friends. Carol and Susan were two out lesbian characters. Seeing them get married and have a kid on national television was a huge deal. But what are our first impressions of their voices specifically?
No, actually, we talked about Helen Willick Bunch.
Well, wait a minute. Why is she in the title?
Because it's my baby, too.
Really? I don't remember you making any sperm.
Going off my rapid-fire assumptions alone, Carol and Susan's voices don't sound very gay to me. They're less marked for sexuality. Now, this isn't to hold up Friends as some authority on queer people, but this observation meshes with something many linguists have been pointing to. That, in scholarship as in popular culture, ideas about how gay men sound or speak are much more salient and widespread than our ideas about how lesbians sound or speak. This popular and academic perception is what scholar Robin Queen calls the special case of the lesbian. Here, I think it's helpful to pause and introduce a concept linguists call enregisterment. Enregisterment describes the ways in which elements of speech, from slang terms to the pronunciation of individual vowels, become associated with a category of speaker, in the way that vocal fry and uptalk evoke the image of a valley girl, or a strong coffee vowel conjures up a native New Yorker. A so-called lispy S gets linked to gayness in popular culture. Once a style of speech has been enregistered, it can come to index or indicate membership to a particular region, community, or persona. An index can be used by insiders to display group belonging, or by outsiders to call up stereotypes, like in the case of Laughing With Us comedy or Laughing Against Us mockery. Now, with enregisterment in mind, let's go back to the issue of the special case of the lesbian. In the 1980s, researcher Moonwoman Baird put it this way: lesbian language behavior in particular goes unremarked. I ask why the dominant society's negative sanction on lesbian revelation and its general refusal to acknowledge lesbian existence, a state of affairs referred to as enforced invisibility, manifests especially as, in fact, inaudibility. Why are we not heard as lesbians, apparently even by ourselves? When Moonwoman Baird calls lesbian existence inaudible, she isn't talking about literal silence, but instead silence from a public perspective. She relates recognition of a lesbian form of talking to recognition of the community. There are clear and crystallized stereotypes of a gay voice that are packaged for public production and consumption. In other words, the speech of gay men has been registered at a higher level than has lesbian speech. This difference in the public imagination can tell us a lot about dominant social ideologies on gender and sexuality. There's an asymmetry in popular understandings of queer femininity, and femininity in general, in their 2003 deep dive into language and sexuality. Deborah Cameron and Don Kulik point out that just as heterosexual speech is often equated with gender-appropriate speech, so homosexual speech has often been equated with gender-inappropriate or gender-deviant speech. Gender crossing, or a form of code switching to a variety spoken by a group to which a speaker does not conventionally belong to, can be a resource for signaling non-heterosexual identity. However, masculinity and femininity are not equal terms in American society. Masculine presentation that crosses gender lines generally has a different weight than the radical femme. Even though I'm happy to see growing acceptance of gender nonconformity, we as a society still probably have different reactions to the suited-up Marlene Dietrich of the 1930s compared to the high-heeled Lil Nas X of the 2020s. Similarly, in terms of language, styles of speech linked to masculinity are interpreted as unmarked, while femininity is marked. Cameron and Kulik then ask whether lesbian speech is not as highly enregistered because gender crossing from the feminine to the masculine is less symbolically queer, or at odds with the normal, the legitimate, the dominant. I also ask whether gender crossing factors into heterosexual fantasies of desirable femininity as well. In something I call the cool girl effect, it seems like women sounding like men can be compatible with straight ideas of attractive womanhood as well. In summary, Cameron and Kulik conclude that a woman who deliberately eschews a feminine register in favor of the less marked alternative does not make the same kind of statement as a man who deliberately adopts feminine features in his speech. This observation is very general, but it may begin to explain why there doesn't seem to be as clear a distinct, singular lesbian voice as there is a gay voice in pop culture. But before I get carried away, I want to question the premise of my own opening question. Do I sound gay? We have to be careful to distinguish between queer speech as a stereotype and queer speech as the broad variety of styles spoken by real individuals. What I'm commenting on in this video is an imbalance in popular perceptions of gay and lesbian voices, something that has to do with language ideology, not practice. What does that mean? Ideology is what's observed when we study societal typecasts. Ideology determines how we expect a certain person should speak, but how much can it tell us about how people actually speak? For example, pitch can also be a resource to indicate gender. On a simple binary, higher pitch means more feminine, lower more masculine. A 2011 study by Erez Levon has observed that a group of lesbian activists speak with a higher pitch when talking about gay-related topics. Another 2007 paper by Robert Podesva found that one gay speaker significantly shifted the way he talked over the course of a day. He spoke with more falsetto voice and more dynamic pitch changes to project a diva persona when with friends, and with less falsetto when at work or on the phone with his father. In other words, these speakers' pitch was not fixedly tied to gender ideology, but varied according to context and the specific goals of their conversations. Language ideology and practice are certainly not completely separate concepts. One works in relationship with the other. We might think of Judith Butler's famous theory of gender performativity from her 1990 book Gender Trouble. In it, she disagrees with the idea that identity is something we innately have that is then the origin of our actions. Instead, performativity argues that gender is something we do. It is the effect of our repeating or transgressing acts that conventionally signify, say, femininity or femme or butch or straight or queer. Like 20th century Fauvist impressionists, we riff off established convention to paint our wild beasts. The point of distinguishing between language ideology and practice is not to ignore stereotypes. Stereotypes reveal a lot about our assumptions, and they can be a shared resource to construct meaning. I think it's significant that I don't hear a clear lesbian voice in TV, movies, and other media. But at the same time, Let's take a step back before we equate descriptions about popular perceptions to prescriptions about how we should behave. I like this simple axiom from Cameron and Kulik. The fact that gays do X does not make X gay. We might just as say, the fact that I do not do X stereotype doesn't make me not gay. Recent sociolinguistic work has been more critical of biases that ignore race, class, and regionality in studies on language and sexuality. Cornelius 2020 talks about the indexical bleaching of gay male speech. Although African American language terms are regularly taken up and appropriated by the broader gay community, Cornelius points out how these contributions are rarely credited to the Black speakers with which they originated, being instead often marked as solely gay, and by omission, white and gay. Jeremy Calder, mentioned at the beginning of this video, similarly argues that it is still an open question as to what the gay lisp, the most socially recognizable stereotype for gayness, means within a community of people of color, or if it means anything at all. All throughout this video, I've been speaking in generalities. It's important to consider, when we talk about a singular gay voice or lesbian voice, who gets discounted? What's implied when we even expect a singular way of talking to encompass queerness? Should community membership or self-identification hinge on talking the same way? I think the way we as individuals navigate different facets of ourselves is complex. Am I queer and do I sound queer are two separate questions. Questions that are determined by enregistered stock voices on the societal level in America, but also by your personal interactions within your own individual speech communities. I've included a list of references for this video down below, as well as some picks for what to read next if you're interested in this topic. I'm sorry that a lot of it is behind a paywall, so please bear with me on that. Finally, I've also added a glossary of all the linguistic terms used in this video, so you can continue having these conversations. Thank you all for watching.